Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our free webinar, Mastering CPOM in Aesthetics, How to Build a Compliant and Scalable Med Spa. Tonight, you will get an overview of corporate practice medicine in aesthetics and its impact on med spa ownership and compliance. Tonight's guest speaker is Dr. Lev Grinman, the co-founder of Doctors for Providers, and he'll be sharing his insights with you shortly. Our webinar tonight is brought to you by Empire Medical Training and our industry partner, Doctors for Providers, who offers medical directors and collaborating physicians a true white glove approach. Every match between supervising physicians and providers or practices is handled personally to support compliance and long-term success. But before we dive in tonight, I wanted to share just a little bit with you about Empire. Empire Medical Training has been a trusted resource for medical professionals for over 27 years. Our purpose is simple, and that is to empower clinicians with the training and support needed to confidently expand into those new procedures. Our commitment to you goes beyond education. We're here to help you grow professionally and safely with a great pathway for your career. We offer training nationwide, allowing you to minimize those disruptions to your practice. You also can earn CME from programs focused on safe, effective, and evidence-based clinical practice. Our attendees receive continuous post-training support, including live faculty sessions, and you can choose between our in-person, virtual, and hybrid learning models. You also have access to membership packages that create an in-depth educational plan for your growth. But most importantly, you can practice those hands-on techniques with real patients for true procedural mastery. We do offer a collection of training academies designed for that comprehensive professional development. These are structured to meet the needs of medical providers, combining clinical education with modern learning methods. Whether you're entering a new specialty or strengthening your existing skills, our academies provide a clear guided route to becoming that confident and capable practitioner. And as a reminder, here's how we're going to use Zoom tonight. Please submit any questions you have throughout the presentation into the Q&A box. We will take time after the presentation to answer all of those for you. You can use the chat box to engage with other attendees or to chat with me directly. With that, guys, I would like to welcome Dr. Grinman.
Thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. We're going to be discussing corporate practice of medicine. It can be a scary topic, could be a complicated topic, but we're going to try to make it as easy as possible, and hopefully it's going to be educational as well. Well, what's on today's agenda? We're going to cover a couple of different topics around the topic of CPOM. We're going to first talk about the growth of the aesthetics industry. We're going to talk about what makes a spa considered a medical practice. We're going to talk about CPOM fundamentals, common compliance pitfalls, the role of MSOs and medical PCs. As you learn, MSOs are managed services organizations. We're also going to talk about how to structure a compliant med spa. And finally, we're going to talk about how Doctors for Providers and its partner company, ProMed Preferred, can support CPOM practices. So what makes a spa considered medical, or why does a med spa form, practice of medicine? There are a couple of things that could make it medical. If there are services that require, the services that are offered, if they require medical judgment, if there are prescription products being offered to clients/patients, if there's medical delegation, and especially if there is physician oversight needed. So a spa business is generally considered to be a medical practice if it provides any of the following: botulinum toxin or dermal fillers, laser procedures, RF microneedling, IV therapy, such as IV hydration, prescription weight loss medications, which are all the rage right now, PRP, or regenerative treatments. Well, what is corporate practice of medicine, and why is it important? So, corporate practice of medicine is a legal doctrine that prohibits non-physicians or corporations/businesses from practicing medicine. It requires that a licensed physician control clinical care and medical decision-making. And it prevents business entities that are not run by physicians from influencing the treatment and also simply doing things for financial gain. CPOM doctrine is typically enforced through state laws and medical board regulations, and those laws can vary state to state. As you'll see, some states have very strict CPOM doctrine, some states have no CPOM doctrine, and some states are somewhere in between. So why does corporate practice of medicine exist? One, to protect clinical independence. It ensures that medical decisions are made by licensed physicians and are not influenced by business owners or investors. It preserves the integrity of the physician-patient relationship. And it also prevents commercial exploitation of medicine, at least in theory. It avoids profit-driven entities prioritizing revenue above patient care. It reduces the risk of overutilization, unnecessary procedures, or cost cutting that may harm quality of care to patients. It also helps to maintain professional accountability. It holds physicians directly responsible for patient care and outcomes, and it prevents non-clinicians from directly practicing, quote unquote, practicing medicine without a license. CPRM also safeguards patient safety and quality of care. It ensures that medical judgment is based on clinical need, not just financial incentives. It can promote adherence to ethical and professional standards. As far as regulation and ethical foundations are concerned, it's rooted in state laws and medical board oversight across the U.S., and it reflects longstanding principles that medicine is a profession, it's an honorable profession, and it's not just a business. I'm going to run through the lists of states that have CPOM laws. And again, if your state has CPOM laws, that typically means that a business cannot own a medical practice. I'm not going to name every state, but they're listed here. You'll notice that some of the largest states in the country are included on this list. Of note, California, which is known to have some of the strictest CPOM laws, New York, and Texas are all on this list, and they're big states. Then there's states with less clear-cut CPOM laws, meaning they're in place, but there may be some exceptions to the rule, so to speak. They may not be as clear-cut. That doesn't mean that CPOM doesn't apply. It just means that it's a little bit more of a gray area. And there's some states that are listed here. Finally, there are a handful of states that do not have CPOM doctrine or CPOM law on the books. And that means that if you are a business owner in that state, you can own the med spa outright. And if you're providing medical services, and it does not have to be, there does not need to be physician ownership involved. A large popular state that is not a CPOM state is Florida. However, keep in mind that if you are operating a med spa in Florida and you want to expand into other states, whether that's physically by opening a new location or even through telemedicine, if you're talking to a patient or treating a patient or a client in another state, if that state is a CPOM state, you're going to have to comply with the rules of where the patient is located. So how you own something in your state may be different than how you own something in the state where the patient's located, and that could create complication, and it's important to comply with the laws of the state. Okay, what is the basic CPOM structure? You can look at it as being there's a bifurcation of ownership and what takes ownership of what. So the physician, the doctor, owns the medical practice or the PC. The Management Services Organization, or MSO, provides the management and administrative support for the physician-owned practice. And I'll go a little bit into more detail about this several times, so you won't be confused. Okay, what are the physician responsibilities in this model? Obviously, the most obvious is the clinical decisions, and that typically falls on the medical director. The medical director is involved in directing medical care. They sort of sit at the top of the pyramid and are responsible for medical decision-making by the rest of the clinical staff. whether that's other physicians or advanced practice providers or RNs who are, following, also practicing within their scope. The medical director is also involved in all of the protocols of clinical care and has to sign off on them. Finally, hiring and firing of clinical staff or providers falls on the shoulders of either the medical director or the PC owners, who are also going to be other physicians. And it's important to note that the medical director does not always have to be the same person or the same doctor who owns the PC. What are the responsibilities of the MSO or the management company? Well, it provides non-clinical services. It can do marketing, staffing support, billing, and administrative operations. So basically anything non-clinical can fall on the shoulders of the management company. One of the questions that frequently comes up is, well, you have two entities. You have a management company that is typically, and let's say an LLC, and you have a professional corporation owned by the physician that is either a PC, can be a PLLC, depending on the state. Who gets hired where? How do you divide the team members between the two companies? Well, if you're a management company and you handle non-clinical things, along the same line, you should hire any staff that are non-clinical. So that could be the operations and practice management team, the billing and revenue cycle or RCM staff, marketing, business development, HR, recruiting, credentialing specialists, IT, compliance support, administrative staff, call center operations and scheduling. All of these folks could be employed by the MSO. They do not have to be employed by the MSO. Some of them could also be employed by the professional corporation, but I think it's in the interest of the MSO to maintain control of these things, and it's typically better to keep the non-clinical staff on the non-clinical side. On the flip side, the professional corporation should employ or contract any licensed personnel that provide medical services or clinical services. That is physicians, so owners and medical directors fall under the umbrella of the professional corporation, nurse practitioners, physician associates, registered nurses, LPNs, medical assistants. Essentially, again, anybody with a healthcare license who's providing patient care should be under the umbrella of the professional corporation. And the MSO PC relationship is governed by a contract. So how do you come together? How do you do business together, so to speak? Well, there's a contract called the Management Services Agreement, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in the next few slides, that defines an arm's length relationship between the professional corporation and the management company. The MSO makes money by receiving administrative fees from the professional corporation, and the physician retains the medical control. The Management Services Agreement, again, it defines the relationship between the PC and the MSO. It also sets the fees that the MSO collects from the professional corporation for what it's doing, and it's in place to protect compliance. Flow, let's talk a little bit about flow of money. So patient comes to your med spa and pays either out of pocket or, let's just say you accept insurance for certain things. Let's say you provide weight loss medications, you accept insurance for that. Any patient-related expenses or payments made to the practice or the med spa, medical portion of the spa, all of that money or any of that money should flow into the professional corporation. And so again, it includes both out-of-pocket and insurance payments. And then the professional corporation, with the money that it receives from patients, can pay the MSO for the things that it is doing. And all of those things I had already mentioned, or that it provides to the professional corporation. So the structure matters because it maintains regulatory compliance, it protects physician autonomy, and reduces potential legal exposure to the business owners. This is a flow chart, and I apologize if it's a little small. The writing is a little small, but it sort of gives you, it puts all of those pieces that I just talked about and organizes them in a viewable fashion as to what happens, who's responsible for what contracts connect the two entities, and the flow of money and who pays for what. So if you look at the very top, you have in blue, you have the professional corporation. Again, that's typically a PC, professional corporation, or professional limited liability corporation, however it was set up. In some states like Texas, it can be a PA. And then on the other side, in orange, you have the managed services organization. They are connected through the managed services agreement, or the MSA. Both companies have completely separate bank accounts. One belongs to the PC, and the second bank account belongs to the MSO. If you look on line 2, you can see that professional services will flow through the PC bank account, and then some of those funds can flow out to the MSO bank account as management service fees. The bank accounts also should be the ones to pay for things directly. And again, on the blue side, on the medical side, the PC should be paying for things like medical director services, provider salaries, provider training, malpractice insurance, and the owner draws. And they can be structured in different ways, the draws. The management services organization, on the other hand, will pay for all non-clinical things out of its own bank account. And those would be the non-licensed salaries or administrative staff salaries, like, say, office rents, business insurance, business marketing, and accounting services. One of the things that's very important to keep in mind is, because you have two completely separate bank accounts that should never mix, you also have two completely separate books for bookkeeping and accounting. And it's important to keep track of the finances of both the MSO for yourself as the business owner, and also of the professional corporation. And depending who you work with, a lot of times that responsibility of keeping the books of the professional corporation will also fall on the MSO. And so you better know what you're doing and have completely separate books for each, as I said. What are some of the risks of non-compliance? Meaning you're in a CPOM state and you don't set things up according to this MSO-MSA structure, and you have some of the pieces, but maybe not all of the pieces. Well, you could be investigated by the medical board. There could be civil penalties, insurance issues. You may be denied insurance coverage, or if there's a claim, you may not get paid because your setup was incorrect. You may even be forced to restructure your business. What are some of the common mistakes that can occur if you're not fully compliant, or what are some of the common things that can happen? Well, a medical director only model. What do I mean by that? And I see this happen more frequently than you may even realize. A business or med spa may hire a medical director and say, hey, we have a doctor. They have signed off on our protocols. They supervise our staff. They may even be on our website. So we're compliant, right? Well, then an auditor comes in through the door and asks who owns the business. And they'll say, well, the LLC owns the business, and they will be shut down because a physician has to own the professional side of things. And if there's no PC or PLC involved, and you're operating a medical practice or med spa, in this case, you can get shut down. Fee splitting issues, meaning if an MSO payment is tied directly to patient referrals or patient volume, that is a no-no in the eyes of the law. And you want to avoid collecting your management fees if they're strictly tied to patient referrals and patient volume. Now, there are a number of things you can charge for as a management company for all the different things you're doing. So, but they should not be tied to patients, strictly to patients. Other red flags are no physician involvement, and it doesn't mean that you don't have a physician owner or a medical director. It just means that the physicians who own the PC need to be responsible or still comply with what they need to do. So, for example, a physician needs to be responsible for decisions of hiring and firing of staff who are going to be employed or contracted under the PC. And also, if it appears that the management company or the corporate portion of this relationship is the one that's really calling all the shots and determining how patient care is done, that is also a red flag to investigators, and you could be cited for a CPOM violation. We've discussed some of this, but there are certain documents that are important to have on board when you have an MSA-MSO relationship. Obviously, the MSA itself, which is the document that connects the management services organization to the PC. You also want operating agreements, meaning what are the internal rules of function, or how does a company operate? That's the operating agreement, and both the professional corporation should have one, and the LLC should have one. Finally, employment contracts. If you're hiring folks, you should probably have employment contracts. Now, state laws vary on whether or not employment contracts are absolutely necessary, but it's probably better to over-document than under-document and have something in writing when you're bringing somebody on board to perform services, clinical services. I want to briefly talk about the importance of healthcare counsel. This is a fairly complicated topic with a lot of moving parts. And so healthcare attorneys can play a very big role in helping everybody get it right the first time and to maintain compliance. So what does healthcare counsel do? It can ensure structural compliance from the formation of the PC and MSO model. It can help with agreements and the ownership structure. Now, there are some states where physicians and lay people can co-own the professional entity, such as in a state like Florida. I'm not going to get too much into that, but again, you have to make sure and see that the right people own the right things. The healthcare counsel can mitigate legal and regulatory risk. They know state-specific or their state-specific CPOM laws. They will help you avoid any appearance of any fee splitting issues, and can also tell you about supervision requirements. Your providers that are working under the medical director may also need a collaborating physician. So an advanced practice provider may require, depending on the state that you're in, may require a collaborating physician. And so there may be multiple physicians involved in making sure that you stay compliant. Attorneys will draft and review key agreements such as the MSAs, the medical director agreements, and employment contracts. And the attorneys will help you because laws evolve. There's so many different things that could change within a practice, or what's considered legal and what's not considered legal, what's in the gray area. Anything from how you store materials on site to how you provide care to how you document, those things can change over time. And also, providers can gain autonomy, or something else may happen. And so it's important for the lawyer to say, hey, are you doing this? New laws have come out. You can do less of this or you can do more of that, and essentially keep you compliant if something does change. Also, okay, so now let's talk about sort of bring it all together and talk about how to structure a compliant med spa under the CPOM model. The first thing is establishing the proper legal structure, forming the professional corporation owned by a physician, and that has to be done with the assistance of a physician because the physician is the owner. So you have to get their permission to open something under their name. You then have to have a separate management services organization for non-clinical operations. Execute the MSA outlining the roles and compensation. Number two, clearly separate clinical from non-clinical functions. Uh, the clinical side of it is, again, all medical services and treatment decisions, hiring, supervision, and control of the clinical staff, ownership of medical records and clinical protocols. It's important to remember or to know that patient records belong to the practice. They do not belong to the MSO. They always belong to the practice. So the owners of the practice and any providers and medical directors need to have access to the EMR records. And also, if there's, let's say, a sale of the med spa, let's say you own a med spa and you sell it. Well, not only are you selling your assets in the LLC, the assets of the professional corporation are essentially the biggest one is the patient records. In addition to the providers, if they're being moved over, the medical records also need to be moved over. So that's an important one to keep in mind. The responsibilities of the MSO are, again, non-clinical, marketing, branding, patient acquisition, billing, collections, RCM, non-clinical staffing, HR, IT, and any administrative support. You want to maintain physician control. The medical director must retain full authority over clinical care. There should be no interference by the MSO in treatment decisions or supervision. And compensation structures must avoid incentivizing overutilization. So it should not always be about money. You don't want to offer the most expensive treatment or something that makes you the most money. It should be something that is best in the best interests of your patient. You want to implement compliant financial agreements. So an MSO should be paid via fair market value fees. And again, this is where an attorney can be helpful and determine what a fair market value is for your services. It's either a fixed fee or it can be a percent of revenue where allowed. But again, even where percent of revenue is allowed, it should not look like fee splitting. And one thing to keep in mind is that sometimes if you open a new med spa, your fees, even if they're fixed, can change over time. You can change the contracts every so often. The MSA could be updated to say, hey, initially you owed us X amount of dollars every month for managing. As we get busier and we're doing more things, employing more staff and spending more time on the practice, that fixed fee can go up. So, and that ensures that everybody's happy. Finally, the financial agreements should ensure that there's an arm's length relationship between the PC and the MSO. This will help ensure state-specific compliance, such as adherence to CPOM laws, supervision rules, scope of practice requirements. You need to confirm that geographic supervision limits and delegation rules are being followed. Again, I spoke a little bit about, collaborations may need to be done. You may be in the state, let's just say Texas has rules as to how many providers a collaborating physician or supervising physician can oversee at one time, especially if they're delegating prescriptive authority, let's say. So you have to be careful that the doctor that you are utilizing as your collaborating physician is maxed out. So again, it may not be the same doctor as your medical director. And you need to maintain proper licensing, malpractice coverage, and protocols in this setup. Bottom line is the following. The compliant med spa should have a clear separation of medicine and business, where the PC controls clinical care and the MSO powers the operations. And if you do that, then you're going to be in good shape. All right. So the last part of my presentation is going to discuss some of the benefits of working with Doctors for Providers and also its partner company, ProMed Preferred. And sometimes if you're our client, you'll be working with both companies at the same time, and I'll explain why. Doctors for Providers has been around for over 5 years. We've helped over 2,000 providers with collaborations and medical directorships. We have over 5,000 physicians in our network, many of whom are comfortable with, are experienced with med spa supervision, and we provide very white glove service to all of our clients. This is just a summary of some of the top highlights of things that we offer at Doctors for Providers. For traditional medical directorships that do not require ownership, and for collaborations, there are no upfront fees. There's a small fee, actually, if you're looking for a physician owner. And we also, at DFP, provide malpractice insurance for traditional medical directorships and collaborations. We offer complementary state-specific collaborative practice and medical directorship agreements. Virtual introductions between the physician and our clients occur before any match is made. So we don't just blindly match you with a doctor that you may not like. We want to make sure that it's a good match. And so you're going to be able to meet and greet that physician and ask any questions before you start working with them. And if you don't like them, we'll find you another physician. Also, the other big advantage of working with Doctors for Providers is that there's a physician replacement promise with no additional costs, typically. And that is because we know that sometimes things don't work out between, between the doctors and the providers for whatever reason. And if you're not happy with your doctor, we'll find you a new one. Or if something happens to the doctor, say they retire, again, we'd be happy to find you a new one. So there's no interruption in patient care. Finally, Doctors for Providers is happy to provide complimentary sample protocols for things such as IV hydration, med spa, and medical weight loss. Doctors for Providers does offer physicians who can be both medical directors and owners at the same time of your medical practice if you're in a CPOM state. This is typically best for MSOs who really know what they're doing, are willing to do the books for both the professional entity and for their own business, and can do all of the things such as setting up all of the contracts, bank accounts, and staying compliant on their own, perhaps with the help of their healthcare attorneys. Now, there is another really, really good option, and that is when Doctors for Providers works directly with ProMed Preferred. ProMed Preferred is a separate company from DFP, and it also specializes in physician ownership of corporations. That's their unique focus, is just on PC ownership, plus administrative support for MSO. So it could actually assist the management companies in some of the things that can be challenging. So if you were to work with ProMed Preferred would turn to Doctors for Providers for finding a medical director and or a collaborating physician for your PC. Now, you can come in with your own, but if you need one, if you don't have one, we will find one for you through Doctors for Providers. And the other advantage of doing this is that it sort of minimizes risk. If you have one physician or group of physicians to own the PC, if you're not happy with your medical director, you can fire the medical director and still have the PC in place. So it helps to make everybody feel more secure, and things can be slotted in as needed. On the next couple of slides, I'd like to talk about ProMed Preferred itself and what it does for the MSOs or businesses that it works with. So what does it do in addition to just finding a physician or a group of physicians for PC ownership? So Number one, it can actually do the formation and the initial registration of the professional entity. It works with dedicated physicians that it knows and trusts to do that. It also has a one-to-one PCMSO structure. This is an important point. There are instances around the country where management services companies work with businesses or services rather, or individual PCs that have an umbrella structure where they put multiple MSOs under the same professional entity. While in principle, you may say, well, maybe that'll save us money because we're sort of pooling the costs of some of the things. The biggest downside of this and the biggest risk is that if one of the MSOs or one of the practice locations essentially got in trouble with the law, other compliance issues, it can take down the entire PC. And if the PC goes down, if you're the good MSO and you're doing everything correctly, you can no longer see patients. So the one-to-one structure is really important. ProMed Preferred can form professional corporations in multiple states. It can do that either as de novo new entities in every new state that you go into, or it can do foreign registrations where allowed of a primary PC or PLC in one state, can foreign register in another state, and essentially start doing business there as well. ProMed Preferred can also do DBA or doing business as filings in different businesses. So essentially the PC can have one name, like say in California, PCs are often almost always named after the physician who owns the PC. But obviously your med spa may have a completely different name. It shouldn't be named after the physician because they're, they should be something cooler, right? So the DBA filings are important in allowing clients in a legal way to see your spa name instead of the PC name when they're searching for your business. Banking is another thing where ProMed shines. It can virtually set up any bank accounts. There's no need to go to the bank to do anything these days when you work with ProMed. They have Chase Platinum status with a dedicated banker. They get everything set up, and that banker is always available to assist. They also will grant the MSO full access to the professional entity's bank account, because as the management company, you should be allowed to not just see what's going on in the professional bank account, but also transact. And it will coordinate the draws for its physician owners. So they will take care of that part. The other big advantage of using ProMed is that ProMed has its own contracts. It has legal counsel that has written a lot of these contracts for them. And they can also be customized depending on client needs or state rules. And so ProMed has its own MSAs. It has the ability to ask its attorneys to review any red lines that a client may have. And it also has copies or potential draft contracts for employment and contract agreements for all licensed staff that would be working through the professional entity. And of course, as I had already mentioned, it allows access to medical directors and collaborating physicians through its partner company, which, surprise, surprise, is Doctors for Providers. Finally, there are a couple other things that ProMed does really well. It can provide employment and credentialing support and also perform audits and oversight and quality assurance. It does routine audits of practice billing, which can actually improve compliance and potentially increase revenue. It can do bookkeeping of the practice's financials, and it can also audit the EMR systems, etc. A couple of other things is it will do license verifications for all the providers who are going to be employed or contracted by the professional entities. So it will look up the licenses. It will tell the physician owners, hey, this provider's in good standing with the state. They're good to hire. Or if there are red flags, they will be picked up and questions will be as far as tax season is concerned, and bookkeeping is concerned, and filings are concerned, ProMed has its own works with a accountant who's familiar with this particular model and will file taxes at the start of the following year. For the professional corporation, it can give you assistance with the Department of Revenue and tax obligations. It has registered agent services through a company that it works with, and it could do a couple of other things to keep everything moving. So that is my talk. Feel free to connect with Doctors for Providers anywhere, any way you want, whether it's on social media or through our website, and we're happy to connect you with ProMed Preferred when needed. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. I just want to thank you for putting this webinar on tonight because we get asked all of the time about finding a medical director. And this is such a great topic. And I am so glad that you put this on for us tonight. I just wanted to thank you again before we dive into our questions.
Of course, it's my pleasure.